I grew up drinking tea. When I was very young, I'd accompany my grandmother when she'd go to the tea shop. They had a big chest of loose leaf tea there. When you wanted to buy some, they'd use a big metal scoop to fill a paper sack for you. They called it orange pekoe, but I didn't know what that meant then. The box of Lipton tea bags also said orange pekoe on it, so I pretty much figured orange pekoe must be a kind of tea. I imagined that England was like the tea shop, just bigger, just teapots, scones, and tiny sandwiches as far as the eye could see. Fast forward about 40 years later to the present day, I now know that England and the United Kingdom are not the same thing. I also know that tea comes in various varieties, which come from different tea growing regions around the world. And I've even learned that orange pekoe is not a type of tea, it's a grade of tea. And thanks to the marvels of the modern internet, I now know that most English people actually know very little about tea. Primarily, they just seem to argue about which brand of tea bags they prefer. So, people of the United Kingdom, I've created a short guide to the broader world of tea just for you. All real tea comes from the same plant, a variety of camellia named Camellia sinensis. The way in which a tea is processed after harvest can have dramatic effects on the end product. Black tea and green tea differ because black tea leaves are allowed to oxidize over time, which changes the composition of the tea. It increases the caffeine content and gives black tea its unique flavor and color. However, the oxidation process, not surprisingly, decreases the antioxidant properties of the tea. Some black teas are also inoculated with aspergillus fungus to allow them to ferment as well. There are lots of different types of tea from around the globe. India gives us Assam and Darjeeling. China gives us Keemoon and Oolong. Sri Lanka gives us Ceylon. These regions also provide other varieties, and there are lots of other growing regions such as South Carolina and Colombia. Teas have been selected by growers for many generations to meet the taste preferences of their regions and to thrive in the local growing conditions. So, although all tea plants are the same species, they have been developed into many different local cultivars, each with its own characteristics. Teas with names such as English Breakfast or Earl Grey are actually blends of different types of teas. Some blends also contain non-tea ingredients like bergamot oil, smoke, or dried fruit peel. Herbal tea isn't really tea because it's not derived from the tea plant. In the US and UK, you'll sometimes hear them referred to as tisanes. I personally enjoy a nice cup of chamomile or rooibos redbush when my caffeine levels have reached 9,000, and drinking more tea is just flirting with my mortality. I don't hate them, and I know I'm being pedantic, but it simply isn't tea. Tea grading is quite a complicated topic, but there are a few important points which are pretty easy to learn. Generally speaking, the smaller leaves and leaf bud tips are the most sought after. Whole and broken leaf teas are considered better than finely cut leaves or dust. Orange pekoe is a broad classification for a black tea consisting primarily of whole leaves and no tips. It's a tea of medium quality and is abbreviated as O P. There are higher grades, for example, all caps, TGFOP, is an abbreviation for Tippy Golden Flowery Orange Pekoe. Since the tips only make up a small part of the tea plant, this kind of tea is typically much more expensive than an orange pekoe. At the far low end of the quality spectrum are tea bags, which typically contain only the lowest grades of tea, namely fannings and dust. Tea bags are to loose tea in much the same way as hot dogs are to steak. You can buy a reusable tea infuser to fit your cup, or better yet, your teapot. Then you'll be able to use any grade of tea you like. There is no one way to make all kinds of tea. Each type has its own optimal steeping time. If you can find a good tea shop or vendor, ask them for their recommended steeping times. Sometimes it's written on the package for you. The vendor may also suggest a water temperature to use, but I find that most black teas are fine with boiling water, while green teas work better with a water temperature a bit below the boiling point. If you want to find the best tea for you, there is no substitute for trying it for yourself. My personal preference is for a stronger black tea in the morning, such as an Indian Assam or an English breakfast blend. If you like Yorkshire Gold, get yourself a not-too-fancy Assam as a starting point. If you're more of a Twinings or Taylor's fan or PG Tips, I'd start with the blend. Either will stand up to sweetener and/or milk, if you're into that sort of thing, as long as you use the recommended amount of tea and water and steep it per the instructions. Later in the day, something a little less robust is the norm for most people, so a Darjeeling blend or a very high-quality Tippy Assam are your best bets. While not a morning tea, when I eat sushi, I like Japanese green tea with toasted rice. It's really, really nice. There are hundreds of kinds of tea, too many to list here, but the more common varieties are popular for a reason. Please don't feel like you have to spend a lot of money on expensive or exotic teas starting out. It's your cup of tea, so make what you like, and make it just the way you like it. Most people trying to shame you for drinking it the wrong way will just be sniping at you from over the rim of their cup of Fannings and dust water anyway, so don't pay any attention to them. It's your tea, and you're the one who's going to have to drink it. At least up and until the point where you start getting so good at making tea that your loved ones start stealing sips from your cup.